then she made him sell the one. She said, you have to reduce. So he sold Retirement Village. Now they sold here, and she's in the Nautilus.
Who's this?
Linda. Herman Newman.
Oh, yeah.
Newman.
Oh, she's in the Nautilus now?
Yeah, she's very, she's whatever.
I knew that she was not well.
And she's much younger than him. She's like 20 years younger than him. It's her second marriage. It's also his second marriage. His wife died when she was like 40, maybe younger.
First husband was a Gannett.
The new one.
I am not going to the 820 subscribing, so
7:30. Yeah. Okay. We discussed that already.
Yeah, no, they said no around 820.
So that doesn't make a difference.
Let's focus. Okay, learning sponsors. Okay, a year of learning. Friends of Malaskotsky, Moshe Zelig ben Mordechai, Martin Lippman and family in memory of his wife Malka Chana bat Pinchas. Friends of Herb Jeremiah Tzvi ben Zev. Friends of Sam Coleman Shmuel ben Yaakov. Friends of Gideon Lazinski Mordechai Shlomo ben Meir. Bella and David Adler in memory of her father Eliyahu ben Yosef a Kohen. Those who were inspired by our Rebbetzin Emerita, Sheila Shapiro, Sarah Esther Malka bat Meshulam Yisachar. Gail and Leslie Kaplan in memory of their parents, Mushka Sprinza bat Yosef Chaim Vachava, Hanan ben Moshe Eliezer Vachana, Pesha bat Shmuel Yitzchak Halevi V'Tzipora, Isra ben Yoel Moshe HaKohen Vachana. Rexford Friends of Gladys Sherman, Gutta bat Meir, Michael Klein and Friends of Judah Klein, Yehuda Tzvi ben Chaim, Marsha Bronner in memory of her husband, Rav Yerachmiel ben Shmuel. Month of Learning by Ruvain and Susan Podolsky in memory of his father, Tzvi ben Pinchas. A week of learning by Michael and Sharon Glass in memory of his father, Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yichal Michal. Chaim Aber in memory of his father, Aaron Meir. Today, a day of learning by Sheila and Eli Zimmerman in memory of her mother, Cyril Bas Menachem Mendel. And Hashem is having Aliyah, Crank Rafia, Velti Yeshua, Hashem Mataliyah, L'chol B'nai Yisrael, Good Gaben Shtia. Amen. Okay. All right. All right. I'm going to tell you where I'm going to start, and then we'll go. Then we'll pick up. Okay. I'm starting us on Ayin Bet Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Tanu Rabbanan, the bright, at the very end of the daf. Okay. That's where I'm picking up. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. All right, everybody have the place? Okay. Tanu Rabbanan, Ger Nosei Mamzeret, Divrei Rabbi Yossi. So Rabbi Yossi was of the understanding that we're going to see the question of who is considered part of Kahal Hashem. Okay, especially since the phrase Kahal is written a number of times. Okay.
Well, 6, but really 5.
Right, we'll get to it in a second. Right. Right. So we're going to see what his position is on that topic. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ger Lo Yisa Mamzeret. Okay. So Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with him. We're going to assume for the moment that he holds a different position, a different attitude. Okay. So what happens? Echad Ger, Echad Eved, Meshuchrar, B'chalal. Okay. The same says part of the Braita. The same applies to whether it is a convert, a single convert, okay, or a freed slave, or a non-consecrated, a desanctified, so to speak. The Kohen, mutarim bekohenet. They are all permitted to marry a bas Kohen. Okay? So what happens? My Tama, what's the reasoning? Okay, we're going to say here, the Rav Yossi. What was Rav Yossi's reasons for saying that a ger could marry in that case a mamzeret? All right, we're going to see chamisha kahalei ktive, that there are 5 times that the topic of kahal is mentioned
with regard to yichus.
Okay, and I suggested those who you were using Art Scroll that they could do homework by looking at Art Scroll 72B4, I believe note number 40. Okay, I don't have it, but I had it in my notes from the last time we did this.
It's all 5 psukim.
Right. Okay, so I won't have to read through all the 5 psukim again. All right, if Art Scroll gives it to us. Okay, Chad leKohanim. Okay, I believe it's Devarim chapter 23, verses 3 and following. Chad leKohanim, one for of the 5. Okay, with Chad leKohanim, Bechad leLevim, Bechad leYisraelim. One for Kohanim, one for Levim, one for Israelites. V'chad lemishrei mamzer b'shtuki, and one that permits a mamzer to marry a shtuki. Okay, so that's a 4th one. V'chad lemishrei shtuki b'Yisrael, and the fifth one to permit the shtuki to marry in Israel. Okay, so that would give, according to one view, those 5 examples of Kahal Hashem, okay, that would permit them to marry from Yichus, but would exclude, of course, all the other Ammoni, Mitzri, etc., etc., etc.
By making splitting Levi to 2.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. We'll hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hold on. So Kahal Gerim Lo Ikre Kahal. So from this definition of these 5, we would see that he does not consider the group of Gerim to be called Kahal Hashem. Okay, it's right in that case. The Rabbi Yehuda. What does Rabbi Yehuda do? Okay, Kohanim uLeviim Michad Kahal Nafke. That the Kohanim and Levim both are considered from the same Kahal. All right, because they're both Kohen are from Shevet Levi, and so on, right? Itar le Kahal Gerim. And this leaves over the fact that a 5th Kahal is available, and therefore that can apply to the Kahal Gerim. Okay? So, all right, which would at that point seem to imply that they could not marry Mamzer. V'ibayatim. And if you want, I could say as follows: Hachanami Trei Kahalei Ninhu. Here too, they are 2 different. Okay, Kahalim, right? Mamzer b'shtuki would be 1. Ushtuki b'Yisrael michad kahal. That those 2 examples of Mamzer and Shtuki in Yisrael, since they both focus, okay, more or less on the Shtuki, that could also be considered a single group, all right, a single kahal, and therefore, okay, it would allow also for the situation of a kahal geri, right? Okay, so what happens? Lo yavo mamzer b'kahal Hashem. I'm sorry. All right, michad kahal nafka. Lo, and then we have a pasuk. Lo yavo mamzer b'kahal Hashem. Okay, that clearly defines that a mamzer cannot be part of the kahal Hashem. Mamzer vadai hu delo yavo. How do we understand the Braita then? That one who is a mamzer for certain, okay, right? I don't want to say valid mamzer because that doesn't sound very good.
Surely a mamzer.
All right, yeah, for certain. That's what I said. Hu delo yavo. He cannot enter. Ha mamzer safek yavo b'kahal. But one who is only questionably a mamzer could enter. Okay, so that might be a shtuki, right?
Yeah,
it could.
Don't know who his father
we don't know the father, right? Vadai, who
delo. Who is ancestral.
Well, we'll see. Vadai hu delo yavo ha b'kahal safek yavo. So the one who is vadai, certainly that one cannot enter the kahal. Safek, but one if where there's only a question, since he doesn't know, the shtuki doesn't know the identity of the father, but yes, knows the, okay? And we're assuming here basically yichus through goes, in this case, still through the father. It's could enter. V'bayit ema. And if you want, okay, I might say it this way. Hani nami trei kahale ninu. Here too, we have two different associations, different groups, right? Right? V'ta'amei de Rabbi Yehuda, and the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda, mehacha, comes from the following pasuk. Hakahal, okay, where it says Hakahal, chuka echat lachem v'lager hagar. Okay, that there would be one rule or one ruling, really, both the same for you and for the person who converts. Okay, so therefore, that would, right? So in that case, that would include them. Well, Rabbi Yossi, but according to Rabbi Yossi, chuka echat, if sika inyan, that where the pasuk says chuka echat, there is a break in the content of the pasuk, and that is a separate item. And as a result, it does not allow, okay, the ger to be included. Okay, echad ger, okay, the echad eved. Now we come back to the other part of the bright,
which means that the ger is
not included, not included, right? Right. If the kahal does not include the ger, he would be able to marry the mamzer. Right. Okay. Now going on. Echad ger v'echad eved meshuchra v'chalal. Okay, so we had the end of the Braita say that the same applies to a convert, a freed slave, or a desanctified kohen. Mutarim b'kohenet. They are permitted to marry a bas kohen. Right? Why is that the case? Messiah le Rav. This would support the view of Rav. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. For Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Lo hizaruk sherot linasei lepsulin. Okay, that the person did not warn kohanot. I'm going to read that into the text here. Okay, that kohanot kasherot. It did not warn them, in other words, prevent them from marrying those who were of a yichus of a psul nature. Right? Darash Rabbi Zera b'mechozim. And we have a situation where Rabbi Zera made a drasha in Mechoza, ger mutar b'mamzeret, that a convert is permitted to marry a mamzeret. What happened? Ragma'uhu kuli alma be'etrogaihu, that they all threw their estrogim at him. Okay, he got pelted with citrons.
You don't make controversial drushes on sukkahs.
Okay. Amar Rava, he's not the only one, by the way. We have other stories of that. Okay. All right. Amar Rava, says Rava now, mi ika de darish milta ki hai beduchta de shechiche giore. Is it possible that one would really pronounce an interpretation? Okay. In other words, give a public drasha in a location, in a place regarding a matter where there are so many converts found. Okay, you were asking for trouble doing that. However, the Gemara goes on, Darash Rava b'mechoza, ger mutar b'kohenet. Rava, however, made a public exposition in Mechoza that a ger, a convert, was permitted to marry a bas kohen. What did they do? Ta'anuhu b'shirai. They gave him loads and loads of silk garments. Okay, right? But then, what did Rava do? Hadar darash laho ger mutar b'mamzeret. Afterwards, he gave a public exposition that a ger is permitted to marry also a mamzeret. Amrule, and so they said to him, Afsidata the kamaita. You just wiped out and removed what you said before. Okay. All right. Amar lahu. Well, we know congregations can be fickle on what that issue. Okay. Amar lahu. He said to them, Detava lechu. No, I really did you a benefit. He says, Avde lechu. Okay. Ibaye. Amehacha. Nasib. If you wanted to marry servants, for example, you could marry them. The ibai meha. Okay. And if you wanted, you could marry here, you could marry there. In other words, I broadened the scope, the window of those who could be included in your potential marriageable partners, right? And the law is that a convert is permitted to marry a bas kohen, umutar b'mamzeret, and also permitted to marry a mamzeret. Okay, mutar b'kohenet. The fact that one is permitted to marry a bas kohen. Why? Lo hisharu ksherot linosei lepsulim, because there was no clear warning lest the kohanot ksherot, that valid women in the families of kohanim, could marry a somebody who was pasul, whose yichus is questionable, right? Umutar b'mamzeret k'Rabbi Yossi, and they are permitted to marry a mamzeret based on Rabbi Yossi's view. Okay, now we get to a new piece from our Mishnah. Elu hein shtuki kol shemakir. Okay, so the definition we had of shtuki was one who knew his mother but did not know the yichus in terms of the father. Amar Rava, says Rava, Devar Torah shtuki kasher, ma'itama. Okay, according to the Torah, says Rava, okay, a shtuki should be considered, his yichus should nevertheless be considered valid, okay, viable. Ma'itama, what was his reasoning? Rov ksherim etzla, that most of the individuals that would have relations with a woman, Jewish woman, okay, would be considered a valid yichus, right? Umiut psulin etzla, and only a small number of them might be of a negative or an invalid yichus with her. Why is that the case? We go on. And if that was such that they were coming to visit her, okay, what happens? Kol de parish miruba parish. We have a general concept here, a principle, that those who come from the majority, okay, we consider them like the majority. Maya Marta. So what are you saying? Dilma azla ihi legabayhu. No, let's flip it and say perhaps she was the one who went to him. Okay, in that case, what would we have? Hava le kavua. There we would have an example of a fixed situation. And v'chol hakavua kemechse al mechsedami. And when we say that it's a fixed situation, we don't use the principle of kol de parish meruba parish. Instead, we have a 50-50 situation. Okay? Kemechse al mechsedami. V'hatorah amra, and according to the Torah, we have a pasuk that says lo yavo mamzer, that clearly says that a mamzer cannot enter kahal, right? Mamzer vadai hu de lo yavo. There we apply a drasha that in regarding that pasuk, we only apply it to somebody who's clearly, certainly a mamzer. Ha mamzer safek. Okay, but in regarding to a questionable mamzer status, yavo bekahal. Okay, right? He can enter the kahal. But yeah.
Don't we usually say something to write something for me?
Let's wait and see. Okay, good. It's a valid question. Let's see if the Gemara touches on it for a second. Okay, hold on a second. All right? Right. Well, but let's see what it says. Okay? What so? But kahal vadai hu delo ba yavo. Ha b'kahal safek yavo. So the drasha here, I'm suggesting, Alan, that's why I said it's a good question, is the fact that even though, okay, the Torah says lo yavo mamzer b'kahal Hashem, right? Nevertheless, we see already a machloket at the top of the Amud as to.
And the word mamzer in that pasuk, it had been before, so it's a reboot.
Okay,
you know, I mean,
that could be.
It's
okay.
Available for a drush.
That
so
could be. The other example is later on the Gemara is going to tell us that the term mamzer could be interpreted not in its, excuse the expression, yichus status, but mamzer could be emphasizing zer. Okay, that one is a stranger or okay, different. All right. Okay, so we'll get to that point. Okay, but before we do, we have another issue that the Gemara wants to address. We've just said that all along it seems that we have a definition of shtuki. Okay, that's the Gemara's definition that we saw earlier, right? That the person knows the mother, but doesn't know the status of the father. Umatam amru shtuki pasul. Okay. We just said that a mamzer safek, okay, right? We don't know, and so therefore that one could enter the kahal. Well, couldn't I argue that a shtuki also is a person where there's a safek?
Shtuki is a safek mamzer.
Okay, right? Shouldn't I answer that? So matam amru shtuki pasul, gezerah shema yisa achoto me'avi. We said maybe that's a gezerah. In other words, the oraita, he should be able to come. But the Rabbanan, the problem is the question. Why gezerah shema yisa achoto me'aviv? Lest it's a situation he doesn't know the father. Maybe he would marry his sister through his father. Okay? Az ela me'at. But rather here, okay, what do we see? Okay. All right. Shtukit lo yisa. If that's the case, we should also therefore include a prohibition where we should say a male shtuki should not marry a female shtuki.
Which is even more probable.
Right? Because that would be all the more issue. All right? Shema yisa achoto me'aviv. And use the very same rationale that here too, he could have had a male child with one woman and female child with another woman, okay? And still, okay, you have that issue. Okay. He could have just as easily had an affair with a married woman. I mean,
but the halacha is if the woman is married, the child is always considered the father's child.
Well, we'll get to that. Well, we'll get to it. Let's not jump ahead yet. Okay, guys? All right? Come on. Okay, let's, we didn't get there yet. All right? Okay. All right? So, shtukit lo yisa, shema yisa choto me'aviv. So we get to the point that we could use the same argumentation to prevent there. Kol kihani must go. Kol kihani must know the azle. Okay, so we're asking the question there. All this, do we have all the enough, so to speak, proof here to go based on this? Bat shtukit lo yisa. The daughter of a shtukit, also then he wouldn't be able to marry. Shema yisa achoto me'aviv. Again, we would ask the question, lest he marry the daughter of his father. Ela lo shechicha. But that's not common. And I would point out that, by the way, Rashi, in his definition of discussion of shtuki, I think he gives two different examples, but his main one is shtuki lo shechicha. okay, that he also holds that even the status of shtuki is not common. And what we always say is that the rabbis do not make serod clearly on issues where it's not shakiyah.
The other concept is dan lachavskos. A guy may have gone flawed once in sleeping with a woman, but typically Jewish men don't sleep around common.
Maybe back in their day. I don't know. Okay? All right? Okay. All right. Hachanami lo shachich. Here too, okay? Okay, we're saying that based on Rashi, okay, that here even the status of shtuki is not common. Okay? Ella, but what happens? Ma'ale asu b'yuchasin. But the Rabbanan, the rabbis made a higher standard. That's how I'm translating Ma'ale in regarding yichus, right? Va'amar Rabba, the Var Torah, and now we get to a new piece again, but it's still connected because if we said that shtuki deoraita should be kasher, okay, and now we're saying that a shtuki is not a common situation. Rav is telling, according to the Torah, a sufi kasher, then even a foundling should be considered valid in his yichus. My tama, what's the reasoning? Eshet ish v'ba'ala tolek. Ma'ika. Okay, that normally if a woman were to give birth to a child, okay, she would be able to claim parentage based on her husband. Okay, all right, Ma'ika. So what do we say about this? All right. In other words, is there an exception to that possibility that the woman would be able to assign parentage to the husband? Mi'ut arusot u'mi'ut shahalach ba'alehem l'medinas hayam. The minority of cases, okay, of women becoming pregnant and being unable to assign parentage, okay, to their existing husband, is either in a situation where it's an arusa, an engaged woman that became
jumped the gun.
Okay, and even then, one would normally make the assumption that it was the arus who impregnated her, because remember, we go back to a previous Gemara that we learned some time ago, where it said in Yehuda they behaved in one way, in Galil they behaved another way. Okay, so I'm just pointing that out real quick. Umiut shahalach ba'aleihem l'medinas hayam. Okay, or the husband is away on a business trip. Okay, kevan de'ika pnuya. But what about a situation if she said she's in pnuya, an unmarried woman? Okay, ve'ika nami demechamat ra'avon. So now we're going to get into a long discussion in the Gemara as to, are there circumstances where a woman would abandon the child, okay, or would not be, or would not declare parentage on the husband? In other words, which would imply that maybe they both decided that they had to abandon their child. Now, just as a quick aside, we know that there were certain circumstances where a family could not either afford or feed or take care of a child, and therefore the child was put up either to adoption or put into another kind of situation. If you read anything about Amit houses for children, okay, you will know that there are some situations where there are families with multiple children, okay, and the family cannot, for whatever reason, maintain all children, and therefore they do wind up in.
We had a man who lived here whose father and put his brother into an orphanage because they put, I won't mention his name.
No, but all I'm simply saying is, so the Gemara is going to now go into some detail on this question, on this issue, okay? All right, so perhaps, says our Gemara, all right, Right. Okay. Vanda ika pnuya, ika nami de mechamat ravon. In other words, okay, and the fact is that this woman, as a single parent, could not handle the situation because of extraordinary circumstances. All right, and the example here they're giving is a famine. All right, hava palga upalga. All right, and there that's a situation of, so to speak, half and half. Vahatora amra lo yavo mamzer b'kahal Hashem. But nevertheless, the Torah says that the mamzer cannot enter the kahal Hashem. Mamzer vadai hu delo yavo. Clearly, since it's a 50-50 situation, okay, we say if it's certain that the child is a mamzer, okay, all right, okay, what happens? No. Ha mamzer safek yavo. Okay, bekahal vadai hu delo yavo. Ha bekahal safek yavo. All right. So here too, again, since we have a disagreement as to whether there is a separate kahal of mamzerim or not, just like we have an argument of whether the child is a safek or mamzer or not. What do you have is really a sfeka, okay, and as a result, one could argue sfeka results in lakula. Okay, so umatam amru asufe pasul. If that's the case, asks the Gemara, why then do we say that in the example of the foundling, the asufe, his yicha status is pasul? Shema yisa achotome aviv. I'll use the same argument, lest he marry his sister through his father. Ela me'ata, but rather from here, asufit lo yisa. If that's the case, all the more so should we argue that a male foundling and a female foundling should not marry. Shema yisachoto ben me'aviv ben me'imo, lest he marry a sibling, regardless of whether it's through the father or through the mother. Okay, kolhani shade va'azle. Okay, all of these situations, these women, they will give them away. Okay, yes, right. Kohane Shade Va'azle. Okay, are we going to say that these women will just put the child aside and go away? Bat Asufi Lo Yisa. Okay. Shema Yisa Achoto. The daughter of a Asufi certainly should not marry. Okay, is that what we're going to argue? Shema, lest she marry her brother. Okay. You're going to say that woman can never marry then if she was a foundling as a child? Ela lo shachiach. Hachanami lo shachiach. Here too, again, we say it's not a common situation. Right?
Marry a ger.
Right? Ela me'aleh asu b'yichusin. But rather, again, the rabbis made a higher standard in regards to yichusin. So we go on. Amar Rava bar Rav Huna says as follows: Matsu mahu. Okay. Now he's giving a clarification. What about an asufi that was found already circumcised? Right. All right. So we go on the top of the next amud. Ein bam mishum asufi. We do not then consider that child an outright asufi, foundling. Okay. What happens in another case, another example? If we find a child, mishalte hadme, that his limbs have been straightened. Okay. And I call your attention again to Rashi on the second line on the top of the Amud. Evarav metukanin umiyusharin. In other words, the family did enough, okay, to straighten out the limb. In other words, physically concerned for the welfare of the child, but they knew they could not.
Or else she had a regular partner,
right?
Her husband.
Right? Okay. Mishalte hadmei ein bo mishum asufi. Here too, we see that child would not be considered in the status of a Sufi. Another example, Shief Mishcha Umalo Kochala. Or if we say that the body of the child that was found was anointed with oil, okay, or the body of the child was with herbs or with some sort of powder, blue powder particularly, Rami Chumre, okay, or we give another example, okay, all right, Tale Pitka, all right, Vitali Kamaya, or that there was some sort of note on, okay, an amulet or something on the child, okay, Ein bo mishum asufi. In all of these cases, all right, that there are knots tied, okay, not, in other words, garments with knots tied in them, a means of identifying, okay. What happens in all these cases? We don't consider this child an asufi. Tali bedikle. Okay, what happens if the child was put in a tree? Okay, how high in the tree? All right, if it was such that the child was put at a lower level on the tree where animals might get at it, that's one thing. Yesh bo mishum asufi. Then we would declare that child a foundling. Im lav, if the child was put up high enough up in a tree so that no animals would have access to the infant, all right? Ein bo mishum asufi. And that was there too. We don't claim that was a foundling. We claim that was a child that was abandoned out of some reason. Financial or others, right? Another case, Zardata, Smicha Lamata. If the child was put in a forest or a bunch of bushes that were near a city, okay? Yesh bo mishum asufi. There we might consider the child a foundling. V'im lav, and if not, ein bo mishum asufi. Then we would not consider the child a foundling. Bekanishta, samichata lamata, ushchichi be rabbi. If the child was put at a synagogue that was close to a city where many people were commonly found. That's where the parallel today, by the way, is that
firehouse.
Exactly. That's the exact example I was going to give. Okay.
What was the example?
That people, the common message to families that have difficulty raising children. Today, leave the child at a firehouse, okay, rather than dump the. Okay? All right. Smichat lamata shchichi barabim ein bo mishum asufi. We do not declare that child in a sufi. V'im lav, and if not, yesh bo mishum asufi. Then we would declare, okay, the child in a sufi. Amar amemor. Okay, a member is going to add an example. High pire de sofle. We're talking now about a ditch where they would store store pits of dates, and animal feed, and therefore animals would be common to find there.
So the kid's at risk.
So the child, right? Yesh bo mishum asufi. In that kind of a place, okay, the child would be considered a true fountain. Okay, another example, Charifata, the Nahara, the river channels. Okay, why? All right, Ein bo mishum hasufi. Why not? They would not be considered a foundling because boats were common to ride on these channels.
And they'd spot the kid.
Okay, and they would find the child, right? Because what would happen is we're going to get to momentarily. Okay, right? Ein bo mishum asufi. Pashre, but if the water in the channel was slow, okay, yesh bo mishum asufi. Okay, then the boats don't travel there, and it would imply that the child would not be found. Tsire rishut harabim, Rishut harabim, where there were locations where a lot of nets and hunting were being
It's
done.
the side
Okay.
of the highway. Again,
Okay.
people are going
All right.
by.
Ein bo mishum asufi. There again, we would not consider the child a family. Reshut harabim yesh bo mishum rasufi. But if the child was simply put by the public
In the
roadway,
middle of the street.
okay, all right, right. I don't know if I would say the middle of the street, but the implication is, again, Amar Rava.
Well, one was C Day, and this one is the middle.
C Day was not just the side.
C Day was on the side of the road, so a Shusarabim has to be in the middle of the road.
Okay, that could be. All right. The implication is where people would certainly be able to see something as opposed to not see something as well. Amar Rava, says Rava. Okay, ubishne ra'avon, says Rava, during the years of famine, ein bo mishum asufi. We make an assumption, according to Rava, that in difficult times of famine, okay, they cannot feed the child, the mother can't nurse the child, whatever, okay, they may, out of necessity or out of just difficulty, abandon the child. Ha de Rava ahir. That statement of Rava that claims that it's during a Ra'avon, ahir, on which example does it apply? Ilema arishut harabim. If we're talking about the example of the public domain, okay, Ide deshani ra'avon katlale. Since they talk about a time of famine, that would kill him, right? Wouldn't it kill him?
Since it's in the middle of the street, the kid's going to get run over.
Yes, wouldn't it mean the death of the child?
Not that the family.
No, okay, no, that it would kill him, all right? Ve'ela atzide rishut harabi, but rather maybe we're talking about Rava's comment side of the road. My area, shane Ravon. So if that's the case, why in particular did Rava cite the example of years of famine? Afilu below shane Ravon, even without it being years of famine. Ella, ki itmar de Rava aha. But rather where Rava said regarding this, the Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Bar Zavdi, Amar Rav, Kol Zman Shebashuk, whenever the child would be found in the marketplace, Aviv v'imo ne'emanim alav, the father and the mother would be trustworthy regarding the child. Nasaf min hashuk, once the child, however, is picked up from the marketplace, okay, so this we might almost call this ein ne'emanim alav. They're not believed about the child.
So the parents doing, having change of mind and coming back to
could be. All right. What the Gemara is suggesting is that we have a chazaka of the parents being able to establish the identity of the child, so long as it has not been removed as a foundling from the marketplace. Amar Rava, says Rava, Ho'il v'yatsa alav shem asufi, since we see that there has already been a clear definition of the child as a foundling, v'amar Rava u'b'shnei ra'avon afal pi shena asaf menashut, and Rava also said during years of famine, okay, even though the child may have been taken from the marketplace, aviv v'imo ne'emanim alav, the father and the mother are believed in regarding the status of the child. Okay, the Gemara picks up as we continue with a new theme. Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says as follows: Shlosha ne'emanim la'alpeh. There are three who are trustworthy in identifying the yichus of the child immediately. Eluhain asufi. Okay, were it such that the child would be considered a foundling. Chaya It's the woman the midwife, who helped give birth. Okay, upoteret chavroteha. Okay, and one who is exempted from the nida, right? I don't know, right? Asufi, hada amran. Okay, but the asufi, isn't that what we've said? Chaya, the midwife. Why? The Tanya, chaya ne'emanet lomar zeyet sarishon v'zeyet sheni. Because with the example of a midwife, we already have a statement that tells us that she can validly testify on the primogenitor of the child. In other words, which is first, which is second, etc. Okay, that's the point. Okay. What are we talking about here? Okay, maybe we're only saying that it wasn't that she's testifying that maybe part of the head came out and then came back, or part of the body came back. We'll cut to that in a second. Okay, but that's what we're saying. Okay, that she didn't leave the area where she was supervising the child and then came back. But if she clearly left the area, okay, and it wasn't a question of what happened with the infant itself, okay, and then came back, she would not be believed in that situation. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, he says, Huchzaka umda, okay, ne'emenet, that we have a presumption that the midwife remains on duty, so to speak, remains at her place, then she would be believed. V'im lav, and if not, eina ne'emenet, and if not, then she is not to be believed. My benayu, what's the difference between the two of them? Okay, ika benayu, the hadar apa, okay, we say that she turned her face away, that she may have looked for some reason in a different direction and didn't observe what was going on. Okay, that was why the second explanation, not just of her moving, but the head of a body part of the child. Okay, all right. Now the next example we said that's who's believable, poteret chavruteha, mai. Okay, what about that situation? Okay, the Tznan, as we learned elsewhere, shalosh nashim shahayu yishanot b'mita achat. We have a situation where they were learned in a Mishnah that when there were three women who slept in the same bed, v'nimtza dam tachat echat mehem, and blood was found below one of them. Kulant me'ot, says the Mishnah. They are all considered in a status of tameh, right? Badka echat mehen, if one of the women examined herself, v'nimtzei tme'ah, and she found herself to be tme'ah, he tme'ah v'kulan tahora. She is then considered tme'ah, and the others are considered non-tme'ah, tahor, pure, right? Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda, clarifying that Mishnah, shebadka atzma kashi urves, that she needs to have examined herself in the short period of time to take a cloth in order to check herself. Right? Now, Tanu Rabbanan says a new bright. Ne'emenet chaya lomar ze kohen v'ze levi v'ze natin v'ze mamzer v'med varim amurim, that the midwife is considered credible, a valid testimony, if she says the yichus of the child, that this is a kohen, this is a levi, this is a natin, okay, from that, or this is a mamzer. V'med varim amrim, what are we talking about? Shalo kara aleh shem ar'er, okay? that we're saying here that there wasn't a question, okay, of
there wasn't an external challenge.
Okay, of somebody raising a challenge, a question as to the status of this thing. Aval kara aleha arer. But if there is an individual or somebody who is challenging, raises a question of the status of the person, okay, einan ne'emenet, then she would not be believed. Arer demai, a challenge, a question regarding what? Ilema arer chad, if it's a single challenge or problem, okay, basically, right? Va'amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, ein arer pachot mishnayim. Rabbi Yochanan holds that a valid challenge can only be raised by two people. Okay? Ela arer trey v'ibayit, all right? But rather where there's a challenge by two, v'ibayit ema. And if you want, I might say, le'olam emalach arer achad. V'chi amar Rabbi Yochanan ein arer pachot mishnayim. If you say that it was a challenge by a single person, and Rabbi Yochanan holds that there is no challenge less than two, hani mili hecha de'ita chazaka de kashrut, then that might be a situation where we say that there is a presumption of the child being yichus valid, right? Aval hecha deleka chazaka de kashrut. But where there is no possibility of a presumption of validity on the child, chad nami mehama, maybe we would say that one witness would be trustworthy as in their challenge. So we finish up. Ne'aman, okay, the Gemara is going to go over to another example of can we say this issue of one being valid? Ne'aman ba'al mekach lomar lezeh macharti, the one who is selling an item is trustworthy to say, I've sold it to a particular individual. Ulezeh ein macharti, and to this one I did not sell. B'med varim amurim, what are we talking about? B'zman shemekcho biyado, at the time that he still has control over that item. Aval ein mekcho biyado, ein no ne'ama. But where he does no longer have control, okay, all right, he is not to be trustworthy. And we'll pick up. The
first guy could have sold it to the second guy.
Okay, well, we don't know that. V'nichazeh zuzeh is where we'll pick up tomorrow on the top of Ayin Daled Amud Aleph.
No today. Okay. And we're not going to unless I get that. All right, you'll let me know. Apparently